Hello, here we are back with the Swing Shifts Hangout Habits. I'm Nancy McSherry Jensen. It's just me today. Usually we're joined by my business partner, Sarah Denwald. I am delighted to welcome Deborah Drake to our Hangout Habits series. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Deborah, and then we're going to have a little Q&A conversation. So Deborah has a rich, diverse background as a coach, a content creator, an author, and a speaker. She was one of the Swing Shift's earliest proponents as we built our program prototype and community at the late great Impact Hub, both in Seattle and in Bellevue. Since then, Deborah's focused her expertise in writing, storytelling, and coaching, including some recent work with SparkType, which is an assessment which focuses on identifying your unique source code for work that makes you come alive, whether that gets deployed in your job or career, in your personal life, or on the side. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about Deborah and her career, the importance of storytelling in your career trajectory, and then how SparkType offers insights into your work, focus, and style. And you can see I've been reading off of my boilerplate. So welcome. Hey, Deborah.
Hi. Great. It's really good to see you again.
You too. So you have had an incredibly varied background as a coach, a consultant, and a content creator. What's the common thread that's carried through all of your work?
Well, the simple answer is that I have been a wordsmith all my life. And long before being a coach or a consultant, I worked in journalism, I worked in publishing, I worked in advertising. My first newspaper job was in my high school, my next was in my college, and I am a proponent of publishing, self-publishing or otherwise. Mm-hmm. And the storytelling piece is I've been a journaler since I was 9 years old. So I have a long record of my own. But there's so much wisdom in people, and from textbooks to nonfiction books to novels to people who write poetry. We have to be able to tell our story, and we can choose the form factor and authentic self-expression, being comfortable in your own skin, knowing what you do and don't want. That's been the through line. So I'm always a proponent. I'm always an advocate for people being comfortable with telling their story. And one of the books I co-authored was, and I remember I did workshops in the beginning with Swing Shift. Burn your resume, you need a professional profile. The professional profile wasn't about where you've worked. It was more like, what did you do when you did that work? Right. Who were you? What did you bring to the world of work? What mattered? What were your core values? That's the through line. It's about being true to that.
Right. And that you're bleeding right into my next question for you, because you're talking about the importance of telling your story. And I think that is especially important right now, mm-hmm. because so many people are reevaluating their work and trying to figure out what it is they want next, and how do they figure both their work and their home, their vocational and their avocational activities mm-hmm. into that. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little more about that.
Well, I'll answer that question by sharing what I experienced when I did the training. I discovered the SparkType, and Jonathan Fields and his team, his first project and remains the Good Life Project. And the pandemic, even before the pandemic, it was like 9/11 had an impact on him. And so mm-hmm. he's basically been 20 years in development of this. He's a seeker of consciousness and self-awareness, as I have been. And I'm thinking, like, why did I not come across this person before? But I'm here now. Yeah. And I hadn't taken a professional development of any kind. Hello, Kitty. For 6 years. But this one, I was like, I leapt. It was just something, there was no question, no doubt. And in the training itself, I'm realizing like I haven't become yet who I'm supposed to be, who I've been trying to be. And I've looked for it in the work I've done and how I do relationships and what I do to nurture myself. Um, and I finally realized that's because if I keep circling back to who I am at essence, which is about encouraging people's authentic self-expression,
Right.
you can put me in a library, I'll be happy. You can put me in a classroom, I'll be happy. You can put me in an office, I'll be happy. But the essence of the work itself, it's not the container. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
But it's like, am I fundamentally getting to be me when I'm doing the work I'm doing?
Right. And I think that that is super important. I read an article yesterday that said through the course of the pandemic, 22 million women specifically, left work. Either they lost their jobs or they left. And that this is where a lot of the great resignation is coming from, where many of them are saying, I either don't want to, or I can't go back to that. And that visit to their authentic self is something that I think a lot of them are trying to get a handle on. You mentioned your work with Spark Type. Tell me a little more about what that is and the benefit for somebody who's maybe looking to make a shift, whether they're working now or they're looking to return.
Yeah. Well, as you and I were talking before about the big five, right? We may know our Enneagram, our Myers-Briggs, our DISC, these things. They're all good. And the Spark type is like 10, because that's what they decided and landed upon. You know, there's 7 billion people on the planet, there's 7 billion sparks, but big groups of big categories of 10 different archetypes, if you will. The people who are natural, or we have resistance. Certain work fuels us, lights us up. We'll stay up late, we'll work on the weekends. We don't hesitate. Other work, we gnash our teeth.
Right.
Don't make me be an accountant. I would be miserable. For example, I know somebody who loves being an accountant. I'm grateful for them.
Right. Right.
The Spark type is a combination of what is your primary, what is your shadow, and what is your anti-type. And to me, it's a triad that can work together if you understand it. It's like we have these aspects of ourselves of who we will naturally be and what we will be in a resistance. And if we understand the drives that we have, the inner and the external motivations, they can work in concert.
And I mean, the initial assessment of this is free. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And there's nothing more to do after taking it. And yet, if you want to, there's a book to read. And then there are certified Spark type advisors that you can work with who know how to sort of peel back the layers of and have conversations either one-on-one or in small groups so that you can better understand those Spark types that are your primary impulses, the shadow impulses that fuels the primary, and maybe even better understanding the thing that you shy away from doing, but that you know how to do when you need to do it.
Right. And I think it's important to have that awareness. Now, you shared with me before we started recording that you landed on an important discovery as you went through this Spark type program yourself. Can you share a little more about that?
Yeah, and my heart's buzzing as I even think about it again. It was after I had done the training. It was after I had integrated the training. It was me doing a lot of additional inventory. And I just kept having this message that was like, hear me, hear me, hear me. And I heard a story on NPR once again about the educator shortage, the educator crisis. And it was this voice that just said, finish, get back into the classroom. And so I'm in the process of finishing my master's in education, and I want to be an English language teacher, possibly in middle school and or high school classrooms.
And you're saying
And
that because you know I have a middle and a high schooler at
yes,
home.
there is not a hint of doubt I'm doing this.
Deborah, I think that the thing about this, I think that is so confirming on two fronts. One, it's great when you're working on a project where you can say, this is what it did for me, and it is moving me forward. And I think that there's a lot of people in the world who are having the same thoughts that you are, that are saying, what if I picked that thing up from the past and brought it forward? And I will say, given that there is an educator shortage, like, triple credit to you for going out and doing that. There's such a need, and a need for people who are really committed to education. So I have to say, I am thankful that you're going to do that. But it's also really exciting.
Yeah. And
A little scary, maybe.
yeah, because we'll be see, but even when it starts to come up, I'm like, psst, I have told people who I know will support me, and then I'm just getting the work done.
Right.
And I know that we all need those posses of support where we go, for people to encourage, what more can you do to make that happen? And what can I do to help that happen? And that's why I remember when I first met you and you came into the Impact Hub Bellevue and you were looking for a place to hold something. It was you were on fire. I remember that.
Yep. Yeah. Well, you look at things, I mean, it's the same as what you're looking at with education. I saw a need. You see a need. And I think what you're doing, and the fact that you're, maybe a little hesitant or anxious about it, that's so natural. And for people who are watching, I want you to know, everybody, when you make a change, everybody is nervous about it, right? Yes, it's exciting and it's a little scary, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It is.
That's okay. And you hit on this as the result of the work that you did with Spark Type.
Yes.
And so for many people who are thinking about their next move, not to say that everybody's going to do this and go get their master's in education.
No, it's going to be different for everybody.
Right.
Something will reveal itself to you. And the question is, will you say, yes, I'll look into that?
Right. Right. And I mean, I think it's just thrilling that you're engaged with the Spark Type community, because it is so interesting, and that you're using it with yourself as you move forward. You mentioned the Impact Hub, and I want to talk about community for a minute, because that is how we met at a community center. It's an important part of changing roles or careers. And so how has that sense of community changed during the pandemic? And you, I think, are very knowledgeable about this. How do you think that, what do you think community is going to look like? Like, are there going to be physical community hubs, online hubs? As we emerge from our isolation, what do you think the sense of community is going to look like?
Well, I know how I'd like it to look.
Yeah. Okay. Let's hear it.
Well, for one thing, I have a network of clients I work with. They are literally all over the globe. And that's what this allows for. And it's not the only way I'd like to connect with them. So the hybrid idea of, I'm working from home, but I'm coming into the hub, like Dropbox early on was, I think, the first that declared they were basically going to change their offices into creative innovation hubs with desks that were not dedicated, and that it was perfectly okay to work from home. And yet when you needed to collaborate, come together, because physically coming together for a meal, the food tastes better. For collaboration, it goes differently. So, and yet we'll have to be mindful of, some people will not want to come in.
Right.
And others will say, it's working for me to work remotely from home.
Mhm.
If 50% of the workforce doesn't want to go back to the office and can work from home, but if they're willing to come in for team building and
Mhm.
face-to-face stuff from time to time, that would work for me. I
Right.
don't only want to be virtual. I want to have physical happy hour, um, or coffee or
Right.
lunch or an in-person workshop where there's the group dynamic and the social cues, because we just miss stuff when
Yeah.
we're talking heads, quite literally.
Right.
But the world has opened up because of the forced experiment of, if you can work from home, do work from home.
Right. Right.
Um,
I mean, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. I mean, and
yeah,
the reason I ask is because you were so involved with the Impact Hub community.
I
And,
was. I was a super host at the front desk,
I
which is
know.
why I got to take you on a tour and show you around and show you the conference rooms. And you told me about your vision. And I remember saying, I have people you need to meet. And I introduced you to the likes of, and it just, I was excited.
I know. And though, those connections happen online too, but you're right. It's different. It's a different dynamic and it's less sticky. Does that make sense? Like I
Yeah,
find that people, when you meet people in person, it's a harder, it's a more tactile
yeah.
and in a more cemented, I guess, connection, or at least it is for me.
Well, so like a quick example that is quite recent. One of my clients, she moved companies and she moved to Spain to be
Mm,
closer to family. She joined a startup that then had a gathering of, I think, about 2/3 of their 50 people in Hawaii. So within a week of starting, she was flying to Hawaii to meet the team she would be working with. And she's like, but I don't know if I should go. And I
mm,
said, well, what would going provide that working remotely with people doesn't?
mhm.
Well, I suppose I could really get to know them in different ways. So the bonding and the social bonding that then comes back into the Zoom call that you're on, or the asynchronous
Right.
workplace Teams chat, it's it's different.
It
And
is.
it accelerates the building of trust, if it's possible,
Mhm.
to gather safely.
Yeah.
So I think that's the operative phrase. Like, even talking about kids in the classroom, it's, I mean, how has it been for your your young person online?
Well, I have an 11 and a 15-year-old, and that's a conversation for a whole other day. But the 11-year-old, the 11-year-old refused to go online, and I homeschooled him for a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
The 15-year-old did fine. She missed her friends.
Yeah.
But so we had two very different ends of the experience. But I think that in both cases they have to do some hybrid work, but I think you're right. It's that in both cases it's the hybrid model that
Mm-hmm.
where they're both doing more online, but they're thriving because of the social interaction. And so I think as people do return, you're right, as people do return, the world has opened up in this different format. So it sounds like it's going to be more of a hybrid community. I'm personally looking forward to having those communities meet both in person as well as
I
online.
want the options.
Me
That's
too.
my answer. I want the options, and I want it to be okay with individuals, and I want it to be okay with the companies. I
Right.
would love to see companies encouraging that you can be remote for them if you're willing to travel to California sometime for the sake of what's needed.
Right.
That would be ideal.
It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. All
Yeah.
right. Believe it or not, we're on our last question. You created this very dynamic and fulfilling role for your work. For people who are taking this time to make a shift, whether it's to a different role or industry or to come back after a break, because a lot of people, when they're on break, consider doing something different. What's your guidance to them based on your expertise and experience?
If there was ever a time to write let's just use words, a letter to yourself about all things being what you'd like, if you know, what would that look like? Just really start with being genuine and honest with yourself. And then once, as we say in coaching, if you could wave a magic wand, everything was as you wanted it to be. What is that vision? It's really about visioning it. And I don't know how long others intend to work if they go back to work. I can only speak for myself.
Mm-hmm.
One individual who knows me well says, I can never imagine you retiring. I imagine myself being in my 80s and saying, I'm not ready to retire, right? So I've got decades to fill with purposeful work.
Right.
So why not have it be something that is as close to possible as what I want to be doing with my time? Just considering the possibilities. So even if it's crazy and out of reach, write it down, consider it, see what's possible.
I think that is excellent guidance. Excellent guidance as we all think about what we're doing as we come into the springtime. It's a good time. Isn't that that's kind of a trite trope, but it's accurate.
It is accurate. Absolutely. Poe Bronson, long ago, that seems like long ago, wrote one of two books. And the first one was, What Should I Do with My Life?
I remember
and he
this.
was featured not once, but I think there were 2 interviews on Oprah. There were lawyers who became pastry chefs, and there were doctors who became rap artists, and there were people who weren't journalists becoming journalists. I mean, there was all manner. He interviewed thousands of people, and then he wrote the book and featured 100 people who had made these tremendously big career shifts to something that gave them joy. There's a lot of precedent for it being possible, but you have to be able to imagine it first.
Right. And so if you're having trouble imagining it, we'll put the links to Deborah's website and go to the Spark Type website, and you can find out your personality types from there.
Yep.
And that will at least get you going in the right direction.
It's a start.
It's a start, right? You have to.
I mean, you did the assessment. Did you feel that it was an accurate portrayal?
Absolutely. Yes, it was for me. I think I was an essentialist primary, a scientist secondary, and my auntie was a nurturer, which my kids would probably agree with.
You are a nurturer, Nancy. You're just doing it in your way.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So very insightful. Deborah Drake, thank you so much for joining us here on Hangout Habits, and we'll look forward to talking with you more.